Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Ray. Uh, Welcome to the Mental Health, Spirituality, Metaphysics talk. Uh, Today, we're going to be going over some of the things that we talked about last time, just to recap, and then go a little bit more in depth into the science of metaphysics and the process of healing. Now, we are going to open up this lesson to discussions in just a little while. First, I wanted to cover a couple topics, and we will wait for to see if anyone else is coming in to participate. Again, if you were watching this after the fact and you're watching the replay, please feel free to leave a comment, whether it's on YouTube, or Facebook, Instagram, and we hope to get a good discussion going. So, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, now, one of the first things I wanted to speak about today was a process that is known as mental transmutation, which I've spoken about before. It's just a quick recap. MTM, or otherwise known as mental transmutation, is a process that has been known of and passed down through generations and practiced for a long time, mostly in secrecy since ancient times. It was known as the holy or royal art science of magic, or more accurately, mental transmutation, or MTM. It consists of a person first, preferably reaching a heightened state and level of awareness where they can objectively observe their own thoughts and let whatever thoughts they have simply flow without focusing or holding on to any single one thought. And then as you continue to observe your own thoughts, you can rearrange your feelings, which can then be shifted from positive to negative or vice versa, and then directed at something in particular and released. The goal isn't to transmute or to change all the darkness in the world into light, but rather to illuminate the darkness within yourself, win the war within you, and then from within begin to be that light that shines forth into the darkness and illuminates it, shedding light on what was previously unknown. So, with that said, I have few things that I really wanted to go over. There were some questions that people had for me, which tie into the overall theme of mental health, spirituality, and science and metaphysics. So one of the things that people have brought up is the process or the disorder, I would call it, of addiction, or really any form of mental illness, I guess you could call it, or disorder. Now, when it comes to addiction, it's not necessarily, or it isn't the actual process of using a substance to change or alter your state of consciousness that is the real issue. The issue is why are you feeling the need to change or alter your state of consciousness. Now, what we do in metaphysical medicine is we try to get to the root cause of the problems. So people have brought up the fact that over time, they have used either drinking or drugs or whatever to cope with different things at different periods of their life. So they're using different reasons for the same behavioral cycles, or the same patterns of behaviors. Now, the thing with mental transmutation is what you try to do is you look at your own thoughts and observe your own thoughts from an objective standpoint, to where you're almost viewing yourself as a different person, so that you can judge yourself without bias. Now, one of the biggest things in being able to change your perspective is identifying the connections to be able to change your perspective and shift your thoughts, which then change your behaviors, which alters your being. And this is what attributes both to our overall well-being, or can account for many forms of illness. Even if it wasn't caused by trauma, we can use these corresponding aspects to restore what isn't working as it should be. Now, when it comes to people using mind-altering substances to cope with just everyday life, or say some type of debilitation or illness that they have, whether it's physical, as I mentioned, or mental or spiritual, even in nature, it doesn't matter what the nature of the dis-ease or disorder is, because the mind, body, and soul are all interconnected and linked together in such an intimate way that you can intervene and interject in any of those fields, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual. And then you can alter through this process of MTM, mental transmutation. You can change your perspective. There's an old song by Sister Hazel called "Change Your Mind." You change your mind, you change your life, and you change your perspective. So, one of the other things that people have brought up a couple times in the past, especially because this relates to mind-altering substances, is psychedelics and the use of pharmaceuticals or alcohol to be able to cope with anxieties or depression, or just stress in your general everyday life. Now, there is a big distinction to be made between using these mind-altering substances for healing versus, when it comes to psychedelics, spiritual or vision quests, which is really using a psychedelic or mind-altering substance as a catalyst to kind of jumpstart or get a quick way of reaching a heightened state of awareness, to where you can then do this work, this mental transmutation, much easier. Now, the problem with these things is that a lot of people use them in excess. There is a scripture that mentions that all of the herbs and seed-bearing plants and good things that come from the earth that are made for for raiment and for the gladdening of the soul and for enriching your lives. All of these things are made by the Creator for specific reasons. And it says in the scriptures that it pleases God that it does these things, but it also mentions not to use them in excess. Now, that's why we need to make the distinction, and I wanted to cover the difference between using these things for healing versus spiritual enlightenment, or using it as a catalyst for a spiritual awakening. Now, first, when it comes to self-medicating, or whether it's using pharmaceuticals or drugs or alcohol, whether it's prescribed by a doctor or whether it's something you're doing yourself because you couldn't find anything else that works better for you. What this does is it creates a pathway in the brain. It creates these connections that then cause you to have these different reasons for the same cycles and patterns of behaviors. So over time, say somebody might start drinking because they lost a loved one, they lost a spouse, so they start to drink to cope with the feelings of depression and the loss and the anxiety and the stress. And then something else might happen to them, and they start using the same substance or a different substance for a different reason. And the whole problem is that you're not getting to the root cause of why you are desiring to do these things. So, I just wanted to go over another topic real quick before I open this up to discussion. And that is something else that ties into psychedelics, mind-altering substances, which is meditation and ways to connect with the spirit or the universal consciousness, which then we can tap into to help aid in our healing. So just to recap from last time, we went over a couple ways. There's prayer, there's meditation, there's hypnosis, then there's altered states of consciousness. And within those areas, there's many different types and forms of, say, meditation or prayer or altered states of consciousness. Now, one of the biggest things when it comes to metaphysical medicine, or just alternative and spiritual-based or completely mind, body, and soul-based approaches to medicine, what you want to do is you want to not detach from your feelings or from reality. There's a big difference between certain forms of meditation, say like in Eastern religions. A lot of people, what they try to do is they try to detach. They try to get to a state of nirvana or bliss where they're separated from the world because the world is an awful place and it's too much to cope with. So they sink into themselves and they dissociate. They kind of remove themselves from their lives, and they stay in that state of an objective standpoint. When it comes to metaphysical medicine and doing things properly and making these connections and being able to integrate rather than separate from the world, what you're doing is you're, as I mentioned before, you're trying to win the war within you so that then you can act as the light that shines in the darkness and illuminates it. The goal isn't to transmute or to change or shift all the darkness in the world into light, but rather to win the war within you and let that light within you shine outward so that you could start to continue to make the world a better place, which, who doesn't want that? So with that said, there are a couple things that can come into play when it comes to meditation. Now, the goal of whether it's mystical or Jewish or Christian meditation versus other forms of meditation, which are more of a detachment from reality, it's integration and not separation from the world. So we detach only to then reconnect properly and healthily to then restore the rest of the world, not to detach yourself from it because it's awful. And yes, it's awful, but it's awful because of people, and people who do nothing change it. We can make this into a paradise. We can make this world heaven on earth. So why wouldn't we at least try to leave the world a little bit better off than it was when we arrived here? You never know what impact you can have on another person or the world. And, of course, I love Star Wars, so I'm going to make a Star Wars Yoda reference. There is no try. There is only do or do not. So there's no such thing as trying. You can only keep doing your best. Because if you try, you're not setting up a goal. And what you need to do is you need to have a goal, you need to set your intentions, and you need to really dive deep and try to understand the causes and the meanings behind certain cycles and patterns of behaviors that are unhealthy, and instead replacing them with healthy behaviors, which this can be done, again, like I said, through a number of different ways. Another one I forgot to mention is reading scripture, which can be also called contemplative prayer, where you read a verse from either the Bible or some other scripture, or you read a book that's very inspiring by a author, and you meditate and you really think about and ponder the meaning of what's being said and all the different ways it applies to your life. And as you start to do that, you can then start to feel easier that universal consciousness that flows within us and all around us, which again is the Holy Spirit or the Great Spirit, the universal consciousness, which we are all connected to, we are all interconnected to, which is why healing is possible through using these things. One last thing I wanted to discuss before I open up the discussion, because we have a guest here that I wanted to introduce, is overcoming depression and anxiety or trauma or even physical ailments. What you have to do is you identify the causes, as we mentioned before, and then you question the reasons. When did each symptom start? What were you doing? What were you feeling when it started? And you make those connections and you examine and analyze your current situation as if it applies to somebody else. So it's always easy. They say it's always easier to fix somebody else's problems than your own. Why? Because we have a complete bias to our own self, which is why we need these certain tools to be able to help us to get through these things. Now, another thing I just want to touch on real quick before we open up to discussion and then go a little bit further into the connecting to the spirit and ways to do this, and possibly if we get some more people here, or even if there are more people who do this, or people who are watching the replay, we'll have a guided meditation to help people connect to the spirit. So, one of the things that people will experience when they are doing these deep meditation techniques, or whether it's induced by a mind-altering substance, whether it's induced by hypnosis, whether it's through prayer or some type of form of inspiration, there is the universal consciousness, which is the Holy Spirit, the mind of God. And our soul is a fragment of that oversoul, that universal consciousness. But our soul has a blockage on it because we're in these physical mortal vessels that have these physical desires and these materialistic needs, and we're living in this material world. We have our ego, which prevents us from being able to really more deeply and intimately connect with this universal consciousness, or rather our higher self. They call it our higher self because the universal consciousness is us, or rather we are a part of it. So there's the ego self and the higher self, and there's ego-based actions and divinely guided acts of the light of the Creator, of the universal consciousness. So, before, I get into further about what to expect in different ways to connect to this universal consciousness and possibly do guided meditation for people who are here now and for anyone who's watching later, I just want to say that no matter what your challenges are and what you're going through, that if you have faith and if you believe, and there's a difference between believing and knowing. If you have faith, faith is the hope for things and belief in things that are unseen but are felt through the Spirit. And through our faith and trials of our faith, we can come to know what we believe. So when you combine your knowledge with your understanding, you can create wisdom. And that wisdom is what helps you connect to that universal consciousness much easier, to the point where once you have cleared up all these blockages that are causing you ailments or diseases, or disorders, or illness, then you clear up all those blockages, and all you do is maintain your state of physical, spiritual, and mental well-being. Okay, so with that said, right now we have with us Clayton. I'm going to share the screen. Clayton, hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining me again. It's great to have you back. So what do you think about what's been said so far? Do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that thesis. I can hardly elaborate on that. It was nice. I understood. I'd just like to, I'm not going to elaborate on what you said, I don't think, but maybe just point out a couple points that, first, I do understand the causes of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know my causes of why I did.
Mm-hmm.
become an alcoholic, and my dad was one, and you know how that story goes.
Right.
Okay. But I use only two substances, alcohol, and I smoke a little weed.
Okay.
For the balance of my self-medication. And can count on one hand the amount of times I have used psychedelic drugs, and probably each time found it useful at the time.
Right.
But, it's just, I don't know. So I'm not going to elaborate again. We will maybe. Okay. Okay. Another point you brought up, just want to make this point. I don't know why I wrote it down. Something you said. I appreciate what you said. It's very good.
Thank you. You're welcome. Of course.
But, I don't know. Maybe we'll bring this up again sometime. But I just want to say, this way I do it. You keep bringing up, using the word objective when in connection with thought. And, the way I'm seeing it is, all thoughts are subjective. I mean, we view the objective from the subjective. I get what you're saying between the transmutation, okay? But there is only the one thought in the one moment, and we travel with this thought. There's not a different thought from one to the other. There's the one moment, there's the one thought, and you can understand this with understanding Eastern philosophy.
Right.
There's one moment. I don't know why I brought that up, but
well, that's actually a good point. Because yes, you're right. Time is, as Albert Einstein said, an illusion, albeit an ever-persisting illusion. And the reason that we have time is so that everything doesn't happen at once, which, of course, as we learned through, physics, quantum physics, there are several dimensions to reality, and there are parallel universes and parallel realities and alternate timelines. And what the basis of all this is that at a higher dimension, everything has already happened. Everything that is ever going to play out in any way it possibly can has already happened. And this is just going a little bit deeper, this might go over some people's heads, but what you're doing with mental transmutation and meditation and altered states of consciousness, as well as with psychedelics, which induce these things, as well as other mind-altering substances, is you are shifting your consciousness into this alternate reality, where literally something that you viewed as, say, a curse, now you realize was a blessing in disguise. For example, my illness. If it wasn't for my illness, I never would have started this journey to be able to help myself first and become a better person in doing that. If I never had gotten sick, I never would have pursued this. And now I can help spread this to other people and help other people. And this goes into what I was mentioning before about the differences between different meditation techniques, where you mentioned, Eastern philosophy and Eastern tradition. It's a lot of it is to detach, where, you reach a state of nirvana and bliss where you're just this world is terrible. This physical pleasure, you can just try to release all desire. Whereas what you're supposed to do, the healthy way, is to integrate all these things rather than separate from the world, so that all of your desires and all of your intentions and behaviors are in alignment with the will of the Creator, with that universal consciousness. So, yeah, thank you for that comment. That was great. It's definitely keeping an objective, or as some people say, an eternal perspective, meaning you try always to keep the end goal in sight, whatever it may be. And you just take small, incremental steps to get there. And any progress is progress. So even as small as it is, if you do one tiny thing just to change and try to help work on one symptom or one possible trigger, say of something that makes you want to drink. Say, I don't know, I'm just guessing here. So you get into an argument with a family member or a friend, and you're so angry because you're right, and you wanted to get your point across, and you say, screw it, I'll just have a couple cocktails. You recognize those triggers, and then what you do is you identify and you question, okay, the alcohol gives me this, what is the feeling and the reason that I use the alcohol in that situation? And then you realize, okay, well, it reduces my anxiety. I don't have to think about it as much. Well, then, okay, it's not really the alcohol then that is solving the problem. What's solving the problem is that shift in your perception to where you're more objective and you don't have to worry about those things. So you pray, you just contemplate a prayer where you just kind of, you just think about something and you just, take a pause, you take a breath, count to 10, and before you drink, you just tell yourself, you know what, I want to drink, but I know what the consequences are, which I now know what the consequences of, drinking can be and what it could lead to. And you also have to realize, all the other health risks that it has. Even if it's in very small amounts, anything in excess is the problem. And the problem with excess is if you're using it whenever you feel triggered to, that is excess. Even if it's just one beer when you start to feel stressed out after, an argument or a disagreement, or say your favorite, sports team loses or they win, so you want to celebrate. Well, there are other ways to celebrate, and there are other healthy behaviors you could replace that with. But it all starts with being able to identify it first. So, I just want to comment on that real quickly. Thank you for sharing, your thoughts and, your feelings on that.
Thank you, Mike. That was nice.
Okay. So, something I wanted to just touch on really quick, because people had asked me about it, was, the connecting to the universal consciousness and the divine source of all creation, the Creator. Things to expect when that happens, and how you are actually connecting. Now, when we use things such as meditation, prayer, or even psychedelics, mind-altering substances, which Clayton, as you mentioned, you tried before and you had good results from. You had benefits from using psychedelics. Well, what psychedelics in particular do is that they can take you to different degrees or states of the universal mind or the universal consciousness. So when you know you're doing it right, and last time we did a guided meditation in Violetta, she said that she'd had a lot of pain in her left leg, I think it was, and after the meditation that we were doing, I was guiding people to help breathe in the divine light and, the healing power of the Creator, and to release the negative energy, negative tension. And she said that she was relieved of her pain, and she was able to feel that oneness and that peace that comes with the universal consciousness. Because remember, this universal mind, this Holy Spirit, this is the mind of God, and all good things are from God. So, some of the things that you can expect when you're connecting to this higher self is these different degrees. So first, I mentioned last time, there are different meditation techniques that you could do to try to focus inward. One of them is staring at a candle flame or a light bulb, and then closing your eyes and focusing on the after image. And this brings your focus and shifts it inward. And here are some of the degrees. And this is from some of my very own modules in my study for from my college, University of Metaphysics at Sedona. The first degree of state of universal mind is colors. So when you're meditating and you focus inward, you know that you're starting to get within and you're starting to connect to that consciousness. And you start to perceive cloud-like or mist-like clouds of color with an accompanying feeling of elevation or inspiration throughout your body. Sometimes this is referenced to as the burning in the bosom, or your heart, set aflame. There's always a picture, I think it's from the Sacred Heart Ministries of Christ with the heart, and it's got thorns, and it's got flames around it. Well, this is symbolic of activating that center in the heart center. So the next degree, after you start to feel this, once you go into a little bit deeper into it, and you start to get used to this feeling, and you sink deeper into this sea, this ocean of universal consciousness, you start to see a vortex, a type of funnel type of effect, as the colors seem to flow from a point closest to you in your inner eye, meaning your mind's eye, to a distant point, narrowing to a point at that distance. So, again, if you were, say, focusing on a candle flame, and then you close your eyes and you're focusing on the after image, the colors start to, overwhelm you, and you start to feel as if you're in a tunnel, and you're going somewhere. And that is literally your consciousness, your soul, reconnecting and separating a little bit from your body to get to that objective perspective, that objective point of view. Then some people will start to see patterns, or geometric shapes and different colors and things that mesh together. And these are the psyche's symbols of higher consciousness. So this is a language, actually. And a lot of people will experience this on psychedelics. A lot of times on a higher dose, they'll start to see these geometric patterns and everything that seems to have a language and seems to talk to them. And sometimes they could be, these geometric patterns can be viewed as roses or lilies, or lotus with the petals and flowers. Or sometimes it's, just fragmented. It looks kind of like a kaleidoscope. And this is all seen in the mind's eye, or sometimes even physically. You can see it if you really get deep enough into this state of consciousness. And again, these are symbols. This is a language, a universal language of symbolism. There was a mystic and scholar, Manly P. Hall, who said, once man learns the language of symbolism, all the valid confusion will fall from the face of the earth. Or I'm paraphrasing, basically saying that once man learns the language of symbolism and understand what these signs and symbols that people see when they're asking for guidance are, then we'll be able to be guided more directly by this universal consciousness and align our will with the will of God. Now, the next degree of these altered states of consciousness are religious symbols. So, symbols seen may be orthodox, religious in nature, depending on your background and your culture and your beliefs, your faith. It could be things such as, seeing a cross, or something more esoteric, such as an urn of fire, flaming torch, diamonds, jewels, or religious figures. You may have visions of angels, and this doesn't happen to everybody, but and then the degrees keep going higher and higher to where then you start to see scenes or vision. You have visions, which, as something Clayton touched on earlier, is that everything in the bigger picture, in the universal mind, everything has already happened. Everything's happening at once. It's only down here in this physical material plane where we're perceiving everything as time, so that everything doesn't happen at once. And that's only on this level of reality. This is something I'll get into maybe a little bit more next time. But people will start to see visions sometimes of either the past or the future. And this is another area where a lot of work of mental transmutation can be done. And this is because you're able to now look into your past and see from an objective standpoint the trauma that has caused you these negative or unhealthy patterns of behavior, or these cycles of just, never-ending idleness, where it's taking you nowhere. And once you start to have these visions or these scenes, these also are symbolizations of areas of your own higher consciousness. So that divine spark that comes from the universal consciousness or the mind of God, the Holy Spirit, that is part of you, that is uniquely you, that is who you really are. This is the way that the Spirit speaks directly to us through visions. So it's not words. It's some people. Everybody's different, but for the most part, people will see it and hear it in their mind's eye, and in their in their sixth sense. There are some exceptions to where people who are more clairvoyant or psychic in nature may physically see things and be able to see spirits and hear spirits or angels and divine beings, but it makes no difference whether you see it physically or you hear it auditorily, or if it's all within, because these are all different levels of reality. And we touched on this last time. Consensus reality is really nothing but just a giant hallucination that we all agree upon. So, with that said, I guess we still only have Clayton in here. Other people are having trouble getting in. But I did have a couple questions from people that I wanted to address very quickly before I move on. Excuse me for just a moment. Okay, so somebody raised a good question about who they are, which I just answered, who our true identity is in your relationship to God, which is that we're essentially spiritual children of God. He's our Heavenly Father, and we have a Heavenly Mother. There's a divine masculine and divine feminine presence, which I guess I'll touch on if we have a little bit of time this time, or next time I'll touch on the divine masculine and divine feminine. And this person asked the question about paying people for readings. Now, typically, when it comes to paying people for knowledge, or for something that someone needs to hear or can benefit from hearing, I am against charging money for that. However, when it comes to finding a spiritual mentor, or you're seeking help with healing, or with advancing in a certain area or aspect of your life, it is not the service that you're paying for. It is the person's time that you're paying for. Because with that time, that person could be using that, for charity and for other reasons. They could be helping themselves. They have other responsibilities to take care of. So if you're going to somebody who professionally does, say, readings or channelings, or they're a spiritual mentor or a healer or a teacher, then there has to be some exchange of energy. Now, in my opinion, that can be a number of things. If somebody, say, happens to be a carpenter or painter, and you need to happen to have your porch fixed or painted, and you also happen to give readings, they need a reading, you give them a reading, you trade and barter, and they paint your deck and or your porch, and you give and provide your services. Now, if that isn't possible, say if it's remote, say if it's online, somebody's doing something through video chat, they need a reading, or if it's just there are no services that you can offer that the person needs, but you need their services, then you're paying them for the time that they're spending to help you. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are people who make a living doing these things. I'm one of them. And, even though I do these classes and these podcasts and discussions, for free, and I upload them for everybody to see, if somebody wants to work on with me one-on-one, then there has to be some type of exchange of energy, because I am giving away my time, and I'm putting my effort and, my due diligence and doing my homework to help another person. So if I'm doing that and I'm getting nothing in return, well, then the scales are out of balance. So that is how I feel about paying people for readings. and that is how I feel about, our identity and our relationship with the Creator. Again, one of the things I touched on briefly was the divine masculine and divine feminine. As I mentioned, we have a heaven. God is like our heavenly Father, but we also have a heavenly Mother. You'll find or notice sometimes within scriptures, in the Bible, or even in extra biblical or apocryphal texts, wisdom is usually referred to as she or her or female. The spirit, the mind of God, understanding is known as compassion. That aspect of God, of the Creator, is the divine feminine aspect, or some of the traits of the divine feminine aspect of God, of the Creator, holds. And then there is the divine masculine side, which is justice, and which is righteousness, and balancing the scales of justice. And that is why I agree with, paying people for their time and for their effort, because, as they say, time is money, and we live in a world that has a system of, monetization where we need some form of currency to buy the things that we need. Now, in a perfect world, we would be able, or someone like me would be able to offer healing services or guidance or spiritual mentorship to somebody, and they would just be able to provide whatever service they can to me. And you live in a community like that, and everyone helps one another. There's no need to exchange currency so that somebody can take that money and go buy what they need, so that then that person can take that money and go buy what they need. It's redundant. So what we come to then is, when we talk about the exchange of energy, we want to understand that there is our ego, and then there's the universal consciousness, or our higher mind. And merging with this universal mind is key to being able to bring about true change in our lives in any aspect, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual. It doesn't matter. There are, as we covered before, there are mind-altering substances that interact or, in some cases, disrupt or integrate with the mind, body, and soul connection and elevate us to these higher states of consciousness. Yes, they are much faster and it's much easier. However, my feelings about that are that when it comes to healing, that is one thing. It is a great tool to be used. When it comes to using it to merge with the universal mind and your higher self, it can become dangerous, because if you don't have the proper training, and if you don't know what you're doing and how to navigate your way around that space, around those dimensions in that reality, then it's very easy to get lost, which is why it's better to try to do it and reach it naturally, which, yes, takes longer. But if you're doing it for spiritual purposes and for enlightenment, it's much better to clear your mental atmosphere and your state of mind. That is key. Now, one of the things that we could do to help practice what we call reaction control, which is how we respond to triggers and things of that nature, is one of the things we could do is learn to think in terms of absolutes, or, as I mentioned before, keeping an eternal perspective or being objective. So learn to think in terms of absolutes in contact with all persons, situations, or conditions in your life. So right now, me sitting here, I am not, right now in this moment, I am not engaged completely in the fact that I am sitting in this chair and that I am engaging in this podcast and I'm giving this, this class discussion. I am observing this body speak and share the things that are coming to me and that I felt prompted and that needed to be shared, and answering questions that people ask me. I'm thinking of it in a term absolute from an objective standpoint. And now, when you're practicing meditation or prayer or these things daily, you start to reprogram your mind. And when you do these things on a regular basis, whether it's only once a day, even at minimum 10 minutes a day is all you need. And within a month's time, you'll notice a huge difference. So one of the things we could do, just to start, just these small steps, is know that if you're meditating daily and practicing the principles of mental transmutation and contemplative prayer and all these things that we talked about, seeming negativity is a means used by your higher mind or God to point you in a different direction for your greater good. So what that means is that if something comes across negative to you as you're trying to connect and you're getting more in touch with this universal consciousness, as you're getting more in touch with this, you start to see things from a different perspective. So things that are negative or things that seem as a curse become blessings in disguise. So a challenge that is put in your way is something that is also an opportunity to grow and to learn and to be able to really work on yourself as a person and to then be able to spread that outward. And then when something positive happens, give credit to God, thank God, bless God, praise Him. Whatever you do, however you honor that higher consciousness, that universal mind, however you feel fit of honoring that, just give credit to that. Because it's that is working through you. Remember, you're stepping your ego aside and connecting with this universal mind. And if you give thanks to that and you acknowledge that, that also helps you to reprogram your mind. So as you give credit to that, you don't allow your personal ego to develop. So you're giving credit to this higher consciousness, to God, instead of taking credit for it yourself. Instead of saying, oh, look what I did. I'm so great. I'm so awesome. You say, oh, look what God did through me. I'm so blessed. I'm so lucky that He chose me to do this. And give thanks for whatever happens, knowing that ultimately the experience was necessary for your greater good. So, like with me, with the multiple sclerosis, I have to give thanks for that. I have to give thanks that I got sick, that I was paralyzed on my left side, which now can move again. I have to give thanks that I had to walk with a cane for about a decade. I have to give thanks that I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I had to give thanks that I was involved with a satanic Luciferian cult when I was younger, and that I learned a lot of these things and a lot of hard lessons that I learned, so that I could share them with other people, and so that they don't have to go through the same hell that I went through. because no one should have to go through that. If I can do something to leave the world just a little bit better than it was when I arrived here, then I could rest at peace knowing that I did my best. And that's all we can do, is our best. And that's all that God expects of us, is that we just do our best. I just want to go to some questions right now. We got some people in the chat. Okay, so yes, when it comes to, as I was saying before, somebody had a question about paying for readings or for channelings and things of that method, in which I also kind of lumped into reaching out to spiritual mentors or teachers. Some people like to look into things that in certain religions and certain traditions are forbidden to look into. It's said that and there's good reason behind it, but in many cultures and traditions, it's not kosher, or it's forbidden to look into your future or to consult with seers or mediums or psychics, because all of it comes from, the adversary. It's all evil, and there's nothing good that can come from it. It only can show you negative things. And this is something that I hear a lot. Now, while this can be true, and it is in a lot of cases, it is also true that, like mind-altering substances or psychedelics or meditation or prayer or any form of altering our state of consciousness or trying to be inspired or get in touch with a higher consciousness, it is just a tool. So when it comes to, say, oracle cards or tarot cards, or just seeing a medium who claims to be able to speak to dead loved ones, or who could channel your guardian angel or your spirit guide. Now, it's very important to consider the source. Look up and research who you are getting this information from. Make sure that, you're going to a proper source. I can tell you from experience, I've, in the past had readings from people who, when I was still in a satanic cult, they were very accurate and they were spot on. But at the same time, it was all negative things. Like, this is going to happen in your future. Look out for this. So-and-so is going to get harmed. I have a vision of somebody getting into a car accident, and it happens a week later. Yes, you can learn from these things. Whether or not it is of God, that is debated, because all good things are of God. So if you're going to, say, a psychic, and you really, really, really want to speak to a deceased relative, what that psychic will say, if they're attuned and in line with that will of God and the universal consciousness, they will tell you, if it is meant to be, then they will come to you, either in a dream or a vision, or in some type of sign. They'll reach out to you from the other side. There are plenty of examples in the Bible, for example, in the Old Testament, where prophets who had passed on would visit another prophet, a living prophet, and they would have a message to bring them. And that is really the only time that it is appropriate to consult somebody like that. For example, I had a discussion a long time ago with another psychic who said that even if you get a prompting or if you feel the need to reach out to somebody and give them a message from a loved one, that you shouldn't, because that's imposing and it's going against their free will because they didn't ask to hear it. Well, I beg to differ. If that person comes to you saying, I want to hear from my deceased brother, he just died a month ago of cancer, I want to see how he's doing, make sure he's doing well, he's on the other side. The right thing to do is to tell that person, listen, I'm pretty sure I know they're in a better place, but that isn't the way things are supposed to work. And in the Bible, another example is there was a prophet who summoned the spirit of a dead prophet or of his teacher or his mentor. And the first thing that he did when he summoned the spirit is his teacher yelled at him. He said, hey, you know this is forbidden. You know you're not supposed to do this. And that was the message that he had to give him, was don't do this. So, as I was saying before, even if something is perceived as negative, it's all working for the greater good, because God is in ultimate control of everything. At the same time, however, you should proceed with caution whenever it comes to anything dealing with the spiritual nature of reality, if you yourself don't know how to navigate through that space. Because it's very easy for just another human being to fool and manipulate you and then start getting, hundreds and hundreds of dollars from you, telling you things that you think your dead relative is telling you. And I'm not bashing these psychics and channelers and people who do these readings, because a lot of them do believe that they actually are connecting to the spirit of the person's deceased loved one. Sometimes, and from my experience, a lot of times they're connecting to a negative spirit. And what you're doing is, by seeking out and opening yourself up to that, you're opening your mind and your spirit. You're inviting anything in. And if it disguises itself as the deceased loved one you're trying to reach out to, of course, if you don't have that objective standpoint, if you're not learning from a universal mind, which if you did, you never would have sought it out in the first place, you are going to be biased. You are going to want it so bad that you want to believe it. And this has happened to people in the past, and they've told me they knew in the back of their head that the psychic they were paying $200 a session to every week, they said they knew they were just telling them what they wanted to hear, and that they knew about cold reading and how they could read body language, and how sometimes, especially today, you get social media, it's very easy for somebody to run a background check on you. If you make an appointment with a psychic medium who claims to be able to speak to your dead loved ones, if you make an appointment even 5 hours ahead of time, 9 times out of 10, if they're not completely aligned and tuned with the universal consciousness in their higher mind, they're going to look up everything you have on social media, and they're going to come across as if they know things that they couldn't possibly know unless God was telling them, or some other spirit. So either they're a charlatan, or they're being fooled themselves and they don't know it. Otherwise, they will tell you that, you know what, pray about it, meditate on it, why, and they'll ask you, why do you need to speak to this person so much? So it could be something simple as somebody died before you got to say goodbye, or you didn't get to tell them how you really felt about them, and you didn't tell them how much you appreciated or loved them, and you want them to know that on the other side. Well, a real psychic and a real servant of God, a true spiritual person, would tell you the truth that this is the way things are meant to be, and that if you pray on it, and if it's meant to be, they'll come visit you in your dream and let you know that they're all right. But there are other ways to know that your deceased loved ones are okay. And it's not always the fastest way. Sometimes we need to, do some studying. A lot of times when we lose a loved one or we have some type of crisis or trauma, it triggers an existential crisis where we start asking a lot of questions, and we want to know, and we want to have proof. And, we want to know the truth. Is there life after death? Does this continue on? Even people who are spiritual will start having these questions when something drastic happens to them of this nature. But the whole point is to try to keep that eternal perspective and to think from the absolute. And if you continue to do that, then you won't even need to seek out somebody for a reading, because you'll know in your heart that your deceased loved ones are in a much better place. Because, trust me, this is one of the lowest points of creation, this physical material universe. Outside of this, you've released from your body, you're free. You're free to be your authentic self, whatever that may be. And everyone's path and everyone's journey, and I believe, is different. It's different when we live and after we depart from this life, depending on the deeds of our life and our karma, or how good or how bad of a person we are. That determines our next state before the final judgment, before the end of time, when this dimension literally raises up in vibration and frequency to where time ceases to be, where there's no more need for time. Now, again, this is something I could go into next time in more depth about these different dimensions and these different degrees of connection with the universal consciousness. But I just really wanted to stress the point that seeking readings, there's nothing wrong with it in practice, but be careful. Make sure you do your own homework and be very skeptical. Now, with that said, I just wanted to go real quick. We don't have many people joining us tonight, so I'm just going to go through real quick before we finish up here and see if there's any more questions. Just want to go through ways to connect to this universal consciousness and to reaffirm and reprogram our minds and start taking these little incremental steps. So these are more of what I mentioned before, just little things we could take to start getting closer. And then the more we practice meditation and, pray and read scripture or talk to one another or whatever we can do that guides us closer to that universal consciousness. One of the other steps that we could do, besides guided meditation, is affirmations. Now, sometimes they're called I am statements. I am healthy. I am happy. I am whole. I am having a good day. I am going to have a good day. Now, notice how all of these affirmations were positive and reaffirming, reassuring of what I want to happen, what I am going to be. What I didn't say is, I am not going to have a bad day. I am not going to get upset today. Because then all your subconscious hears is, I am, and then bad day. It doesn't care about the not. It doesn't care about those things. It cares about those keywords. So you gotta try to, and you could write your own affirmations because it's personal to each person. I'm just being general about this, but you can give yourself the following affirmations at least once daily at a time when your mind is in a meditative or self-hypnotic state. So when you take the time, which can only, at least, very least 10 minutes is all you need. When you're taking that time to get into a meditative state, you continue to do this daily until you find yourself reacting with a positive reflex to negative experiences in your life. So with some people, this may take only a few days, and with others, a few weeks, but the essential point is to persist until you've mentally mastered the steps. So again, what you want to do is you get into this meditative state and you give yourself these positive affirmations. You give yourself, I am happy, I am healthy, or I know I am going to get through whatever challenges life may throw at me. I know that I am going to be safe and I'm going to be protected. I know that every experience, even though it may seem negative, is for the greater good. I know that a negative experience is a signal and a challenge to my mind to react positively and spiritually. And you continue to do these tiny little steps until it programs into your mind to where, as I said before, you react with a positive reflex to negative experiences in your life, or negative situations. So somebody gets irate, say you're at the cash register and the guy behind you is telling you, hurry up, you're taking too long, come on, I got a dinner appointment, you're taking your sweet ass time, come on, move it, come on. And your first instinct, instead of thinking, tell this guy to where to go, your reflex is, oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'm moving as fast as I can. I apologize for taking up your time. Now that does a few things. Number one, it throws the other person off. Because 9 times out of 10, they're expecting a negative or a irate response from you. Because they're angry, they're all worked up, they want to release that adrenaline. What you do is, not only are you helping yourself, you're avoiding conflict, but you're diffusing the situation just by changing the way you react to their intended comments. So if somebody intends to insult you, for example, if somebody says, hey Mike, you look a lot better with hair, maybe you should go back or stop wearing a wig. Instead of saying, you know what, screw you. Who the hell are you to tell me how I look? This is my body. I can do whatever I want with it. No, that's the ego talking. Instead, you say, oh, thanks. Maybe you're right, but I kind of like my head shaved. I like the way it feels. It looks nice and shiny on camera. It works for me. Just consider the source. Take everything from an objective standpoint, everything from that universal mind. And as you start to do these things more and more on a daily basis, as often as you can, anytime you feel a trigger to do anything that is any type of unhealthy coping mechanism, whether it's an addiction, whether it's, yelling, whether it's screaming, whether it's breaking things, or, putting other people down to make yourself feel better, or whatever it is, or boasting yourself up and being egocentric. Instead, what you want to do is you want to really try to be humble and allow that universal consciousness to flow through you so that every reaction you have is going to cause a positive response in the people around you. And then you never know what type of impression or what type of, impact you're going to have on somebody else. And then you never know what they might do with that and how they'll affect other people. But we do know that if we sit back and we do nothing, things aren't going to get better. And we do know that if we bring ourselves down to, a negative level, to people who are acting at their ego and their negative self, their shadow self, if we lower ourselves instead of elevating ourselves, things are only going to get worse or stay the same. And it's all up to us. And the people who realize this and who are learning and are aware of these things, I would even go as far as saying it's our duty and our responsibility to carry out this work, to carry out the work of God and building the kingdom of heaven on earth. We can make this into a paradise. Why wouldn't we? If we have the power and we can, I think we should. So, before I get to my closing remarks, there were just a couple things I wanted to touch on. Some more affirmations. Okay, so here is a prayer treatment. Now, this prayer is written in such a way, using neuro-linguistic programming, that when you say this prayer to yourself, whether it's out loud or to your mind, you read it. And I will post this also on the Facebook group, and I'll post a link to it on YouTube and anywhere else this is posted. This is constructed in such a way that it reaffirms your belief and your connection to this higher consciousness. So as you say this and as you meditate on each word and each meaning, really let it sink in. So I'm going to recite this prayer now. There is but one mind in the universe, that is God. And my part of that one mind is one with the one mind of God now. All thought processes of my mind are open to, sensitive to, and receptive to the impress of wisdom from my God mind. My mind is impressed with creativity, inspiration, and guidance from the divine, transcendent part of my God mind, mystical light of self-truth from the indwelling radiance of my God mind. Every day, in every way, in everything I do, the light of my God mind goes before me to light my way in life. For this realization of oneness in my mind, I give thanks. And so it is. Amen.
Amen.
Now, this is just a reaffirming affirmation prayer that we could use to help us remember each day this universal consciousness that we are connecting to. And I just want to introduce and say hello to another guest we have. We have Violetta is here. Hi, Violetta.
Hello.
Good to see you
Hello.
again.
How are you tonight? Very interesting themes indeed. I liked your prayer so much. I already felt it. It is so inspirational, wonderful.
Thank you.
And I would ask you something because we are closing the meeting. Some thoughts went through my mind. For example, what should we do to not to absorb negative energy from our surrounding? To affirm something at the moment or something like that, or some special prayer to be protected more or something like that.
Right.
I would be thankful if you can answer now. Yeah.
That is a great question. And I just touched on that a little bit earlier. One of the things that we could do is we could take these tiny little incremental steps towards reaching this state of our universal mind and separating from our ego and this very physical and materialistic based mindset to this universal consciousness. And once we do that, we start to have a shift in our perception to where we realize that things that even we perceive or seem negative to us are working for the greater good. And where there is something negative, that is something telling our mind that there's something that needs to be fixed there, that there's a challenge, that there's something to be learned from. So I use the example a lot of my MS and, my physical ailments and, my the PTSD that I suffered from. If it wasn't for these things, which at the time I saw as being very negative and not useful or helpful in any way whatsoever, now I look back at it and I realize a curse is a blessing in disguise. It just depends how you look at it. Because if it wasn't for me going through all these things, I never would have done the introspective work and, the work on myself to be able to elevate to where I am now and get to where I am now. I never would have learned the things that I can now share with other people. And if I never had these learning experiences and these challenges, then I never would have grown to the person that I am today. And if I can just affect one person's life positively, and they affect just one person's life positively, well, that is the whole point of it. And while you're doing that, while you're putting positivity and light out into the world after doing your own inner work, that is ultimately what's going to protect you the most. And at the same time, you also have to just kind of accept that everything is going to work out for the greater good. And that some things that we may perceive or, that seem negative to us, we may not have the full picture. So we got to keep, as I was saying, an eternal perspective or an absolute eternal perspective to where we keep that end goal in sight, knowing that wherever we want to be, wherever we want to end up, is what's driving us. And that any obstacles or challenges in the way, we can use them as opportunities to grow. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but...
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. Very valuable.
You're welcome.
Answer. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to try, making a point that there really are no negative experiences, only things we see as negative. But I guess to answer your question a little bit further, to protect yourself from, I guess, descending lower or falling into a lower state of, dis-ease or disorder or being more unhealthy, one of the things that we could do is we could continue to try to connect to the universal consciousness through prayer, through different forms of meditation, through reading scripture, through reading books, through talking to other people. And a lot of times when it comes to dealing with negative people or people who are acting negatively, if you don't want that to affect you, you don't want that energy to get on you, you don't want it to affect you. One of the things you could do is like that guided meditation I did last time. You could do the box breathing, where you breathe in the light and you exhale the negativity, and we could try that again tonight. Another way is you can try to diffuse the situation by using positivity. So the same way we could use mental transmutation to change and shift our own perception from seeing something as negative to positive, we can manifest that outwardly into the world, which is why we do this. And so if somebody comes at us with a negative reaction, and we are doing all these little steps to get closer to reaching this state of this universal mind, then we know we're getting there when our reaction to negative situations is positive. For example, if we're online at the cash register and the person behind us is starting to get all irate and they're yelling at us, telling us to hurry up and, you're worthless, come on, move your ass, you're lazy, come on, worry, instead of, reacting negatively and lowering yourself to their level, keep yourself elevated by using just positivity. Even if you're feeling negative emotions, let it pass. You don't have to act on that feeling that you're going to be offended. Instead, as you do these things more regularly, it'll come more naturally to you, and you'll just turn and say, oh, I'm sorry you're in a rush. I'm sorry, I'm moving as fast as I can. I apologize for taking your time. And that does a few things. Number one, it throws them off because they're expecting a negative reaction or some type of, arousal out of you. And you're diffusing the situation and avoiding conflict. And you never know how you're going to impact somebody else. So they might look at you and say, wow, you know what? Maybe I should try that with my spouse or with my kids or with my boss or sometimes, when they're yelling at me and they're getting all irate, instead of me starting to raise my voice and match them, if they say, F you worthless piece of, hey, listen, there's no need to start cursing. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry I made a mistake. I won't let it happen again. What can they say after that? Yeah, well, okay. All right. You just try to avoid the situation. You wash your hands of it. You dust your feet off and you leave the room, so to speak. So that the best way is to be proactive, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Is to avoid those situations.
Yes, very good advice. I like it really. And it works for sure. Yeah, putting some boundaries is very important too.
Yeah.
I made several mistakes in my life. I didn't do that, and I was wrong firstly about myself and then others whom I love. So that is a problem sometimes with spiritual people. They have no boundaries. They don't know to say no,
Right.
So maybe we should talk about it some other time or whatsoever.
Yes.
Whatever you like. Yeah.
Sure. Well, you could always, message me directly and we can talk about this. But right now, I think we're going on like an hour and a half. So I'm just going to start making some closing remarks. I said if we had any more participants, we do another guided meditation. So I'll just make a couple closing remarks, do a guided meditation, and then If you guys have anything else you guys want to add, just let me know. And if there's anyone, again, watching in the comment section, you're sending me messages, I'm reading them. So I will be responding to your questions. One of which, speaking of questions. So somebody asked a question about helping a friend who, or a relative, who has been seeing and experiencing these spiritual entities. They see shadow people, and they're very thrown off about it, but they keep saying that they're fine, they're all right. And anytime something spiritual or religious is brought up, they react very negatively to it. So I did a lot of praying and, meditating on this. And what I came up with is that what you can do is, and anyone can do this, and this can be applied to, a lot of situations, because I'm sure a lot of people have this problem. Whether you're a religious person and, you identify a problem where you're spiritual and you really know that there's something either spiritually or psychologically wrong with someone, and you know how to help them, but you don't know the right way to get through to them because there's that boundary there, that language boundary, and the person has walls up, and it's like, trying to get through a brick wall with a little pin. It's not a bubble, it's a brick wall. So what you got to do is try to find ways to get through to them without using spiritual vocabulary or terminology. So, for example, instead of saying, let's sit down and meditate and do a prayer and, do a cleansing of this house and, remove any negative energy, which is something else that we could do that, I'll show you guys and explain that. In fact, that's what the guided meditation will be. It's about expelling any negative energies or spiritual entities or dark spiritual entities from your presence and from your home. So instead of bringing up and using those words and those phrases, you could translate it into, for lack of a better term, just modern English. And you could say, okay, let's take all of the things that we don't like about this house, identify what the cause is, and then do something about it. Or let's take all the problems that you're experiencing, get to the bottom of it, really, and then see what the options are. And then if the options happen to be, if it turns out you come to the conclusion, it is something spiritual, well, then you take the person, by their hand, and you take them step by step. You don't just lay it on them and say, okay, you got to, you raise your right hand and you say this in the name of Jesus and this, and you rebuke the spirits. And that is going to turn somebody off. Instead, what you want to do is, again, you take these little incremental steps, or as they say, you plant a seed. And what really matters is that the person has a desire and that they want help. So if somebody, say, for this example, is seeing spirits and they're being woken up at night and it's interfering with their life, they can't sleep, they're getting distracted, at school or work, whatever it is. Ask the person, start with asking them questions. What do you think it is? What do you think is causing it? Do you think you need to see a psychiatrist? Do you think you need to see a doctor? And then, of course, you do your homework and you see if they have some of the symptoms that might call for, some type of medical help or alternative medical help, or alternative medicine. And what you want to do is try to just stay away from laying on it like, here, I know what's happening, I know how to help it, listen to me. Instead, it's more like, you already know it. Like, to use an example or metaphor, when I was in elementary school, the teacher would ask a question she knows the answer to see who in the class knew it. So she'd be like, okay, and is this word an adjective or is it a noun? Does anyone know? And then a couple of kids will raise their hands. It's like the teacher isn't asking the question because they don't know. They're asking it so that the students can figure it out for themselves and even know the right question to ask. So when it comes to something like this specifically, you could ask them, do you think this is something that is psychological? Do you think it's in your head? Do you think there's someone playing tricks on you? Or do you think this is something spiritual? Do you believe in something spiritual? Well, okay, no matter what it is, what are some things you think you could do about that if you want it to stop, if it's bothering you? So that's my answer to that question. Another one was something that I'm going to have to touch on next time. And then we'll move into the meditation on clearing out negative energy. Is, again, the divine masculine and divine feminine energies of the Creator. So, as I said before, God, the Creator, to us is kind of like our spiritual parent. And we have a heavenly Father, we have a heavenly Mother. Wisdom and knowledge and understanding in the Bible a lot of times, especially in Psalms, is referred to as her or she. So the mind, the divine mind, the consciousness of God, this compassionate, this loving, this healing energy, that's the divine feminine aspect of the Creator. And then the divine masculine aspect of the Creator is the just, is the righteous, is the is the rules, and the one who enforces the laws. And together they balance themselves out, and that's how you have a God that is both just and merciful and all-loving and omnipotent, because he's all-encompassing. And today, that brings us to our problems, because we have these several spiritual movements and spiritual awakenings that are happening simultaneously around the world with a lot of people. And sometimes people will be misled, and then they'll, start speaking to one another, and they'll join groups, and that's how, cults get started. And right now, what we have that we're dealing with, and I might get a little backlash for saying this, is we have a cult of personality when it comes to our identity crisis, especially in our children today, specifically with our gender identity. Now, a lot of people are confusing the divine masculine and the divine feminine for male and female. I'm going to just flat out say divine masculine and divine feminine have nothing to do with your genitals. It has nothing to do with whether you're a biological male or biological female. We both have divine masculine and feminine energies within ourselves, because we're all made in the image of the Creator. We all have these energies that we're supposed to balance within ourselves. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you're a man, typically you tend to lean more towards the divine masculine aspect. So you have more of the divine masculine characteristics of the creator that shine through you if you're a male. Sometimes it can lean the other way, and the same thing with females. Sometimes they can be more masculine. The whole point is to try to balance out these two. And as I was mentioning before about different types of meditation, the goal isn't to separate completely from your body and disregard it and disregard this world that you live in because it's awful. It's to integrate these things healthily and properly so that you can then win the war within you and start to spread that light outward into the world and be a beacon of that light. Again, as I said before, the goal isn't to change all the darkness in the world into light. It's to awaken that light within you and to be that light that shines in the darkness and to help other people turn their light on. Because without that, this world is just darkness. We are the light. We are those sparks of the Creator that are in human form. And when it comes to this gender identity crisis, a lot of times children are most, impacted because they're most easily influenced, and they confuse masculinity and femininity with male and female. There are plenty of examples of, men who are very feminine in nature and women who are very masculine in nature. Now, notice I'm not talking about whether or not that makes you a man or a woman. There's a scientific fact. There are biological males and biological females. What I'm saying is then there's this divine masculine, divine feminine aspect of the Creator that shines through us. Sometimes people get that confused with their own gender identity. If they're a male, then they tend to lean more towards the feminine aspect. They start to think, maybe I'm born in the wrong body, or maybe there's something wrong with me, and it could manifest in a bunch of different ways. But the problem today, and I say problem, is because it's affecting the youth and the children. And it's confusing them to the point where now it's become a legal issue to where if an 8 or 9-year-old is, influenced by popular culture and they feel different, they think there's something different about them, and they're influenced to think that, if there's something different about me, I'm leaning more towards the masculine or feminine side as a man or a woman, that must mean I'm born in the wrong body. And then they start giving that young kid hormones, which then 5 years down the road, if you're a kid, 5 years is a long time. So if you're 8, 9 years old and you start taking hormones, 5 years later, you might regret it. And the suicide rate of transgender teens and kids is, going through the roof. And that's both for people who transitioned and you haven't transitioned. And I am not putting anyone down. I'm not trying to negate anyone's personal, subjective truth that who am I to argue that somebody wasn't born in the wrong body? Or that part of their journey is to change their body to feel more like they do on the inside. That's their choice. However, that choice should be left up to an adult with a fully developed brain who can make rational decisions without being influenced by popular culture or the opinions of others. And I just think it's an egregious sin and very big manipulation tactic that is used by certain special interest groups to push this agenda. I'm not saying that part of it isn't true, that there isn't something to it, but it's, by the media and by popular culture, it's overblown out of proportion to where maybe the actual statistics, and I'm just making this up, if it's every 3 out of 10 people are actually transgender. And yet, today you have every 8 out of 10 people identifying as transgender. Well, then there's a problem there. And of course, what is the problem? Well, I would advise anyone who is working with somebody who is thinking about transitioning or is questioning their gender identity, that they would consider very, intimately what it is that is triggering them to feel this way. And it could very well be that they are a man who's leaning more towards the feminine side, and that's just their nature, and they feel more comfortable in that body, after transitioning. However, there is also the fact that, our DNA is a physical manifestation, representation of our soul. So if you were born a certain way, no matter how you feel on the inside, or how you want to change your appearance, look on the outside, you still are the same person. And it doesn't change a thing. And it shouldn't change how other people see you or view you. But the sad thing is that it will. And that before somebody goes and makes a huge life-changing decision like that, especially if you're a parent of a child who is going through some of this, and then you should be very cautious in proceeding and trying to really figure out, is this truly somebody who's transgender? So, and of course that is completely unrelated to the divine masculine, divine feminine, but a lot of people get those things confused. So that's just another question that I wanted to address real quick. Any comments, questions before we go to our meditation?
Yes. I like your point of view. Very good and very healthy. I like it very much.
Thank you.
And I think
appreciate
it will help many people, yes, nowadays.
That was very good, Mike. It was beautiful. You had
Thank
a lot to say. I'll hear it again. Thank you.
Hey, anytime. That's why I'm here. Okay, so without further ado, let's get to the guided meditation. Now, if I can just find... Okay. So, like last time, what we want to do is we want to sit in a position where we're comfortable, but not too comfortable to where we'll fall asleep. We're sitting in a chair, we cross our legs. Good. Lay back, sit back, just make sure your spine is straight. Try to keep your shoulders back. Close your eyes. And we're going to start inhaling to the count of 5. 1. 5. Hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5, and inhale. And as you inhale, see white, divine light surrounding you, and you're breathing it in into your soul, into your heart. And you hold that breath and you hold that space. You hold it there and you just feel it. 3, 4, 5. And as you exhale, 3, 4, 5. Hold that space. Inhale again, breathing in, taking in all that white, pure, divine light. You hold that space, and you just feel it. Now you might start to feel some inner peace, comfort, quiet to your mind. And exhale, and as you exhale, picture the light expanding around you, pushing everything away, all directions. And you hold that space where everything in you, everything around you is light. You inhale again. The light now is getting stronger. And as you inhale, this divine white light is protecting you and guiding you from any and all negativity and negative influences. You hold that space. 3, 4, 5. You exhale, and you see the entire room, entire house, everything around you filling up with light. Everything is brighter. The darkness is scattering. And you hold that space to the count of 5. You breathe in again. Now the light is even stronger than before. As you breathe in, 3, 4, 5, hold it. Now this divine white light is illuminating and has banished all the darkness in you and around you. And you exhale. And now you're exhaling pure light. And you're breathing in pure light. And now say to yourself these words: I am whole. I am light. I am protected. I am whole. I am light. I am protected. I am whole. I am light. And I am protected. Keep breathing. Any and all negative influences are not allowed near you or around you. You give them no energy, and you take your energy back as you continue to inhale this divine white light which fills your soul and your body. You hold that space, And then you exhale the light into the room. There is no more darkness there. And you hold that space. Now take one last big breath. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it. You are whole. You are light. You are protected. The divine source and the Spirit of God is your shepherd and your guide. And the Creator is guiding you towards what is best. And you trust in that. Continue to breathe. And remember, when you open your eyes, all the darkness will be gone, and the room is filled with light. You were protected, and this space around you is now sacred. And now, one last time, breathing in all that light. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5. And now as you exhale, 5. You're starting to feel the room around you. 4. You can feel the ground. You can hear things around you. 4. Starting to gather sensations of your surroundings again. 3. You are now listening to the sound of my voice as you are now purified and whole and protected. 2. You are now waking up and refreshed. And 1. Open your eyes. Okay. So how's everyone feeling? How's everyone feeling?
Good night.
Welcome to the new world, I said.
Welcome to the new world.
So much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Yes.
Thank you. And remember, anyone who's watching this afterwards, you could do it again with us. You could do the same thing. And you could repeat it as much as you want. If you want to go back and rewatch this, we will. You could go through all the steps, and if you just keep applying them, just one tiny little step at a time, you'll start to see over a period of days and weeks and the progress that you'll make, and you'll really be surprised, and you'll surprise yourself. And as always, you will have a greater appreciation for life, and you'll start to see the divine and the light in others and more people and things around you. So I just want to thank everyone again, Violetta, Clayton, thank you everyone else who typed in and wrote in the chat questions. Thank you guys so much again. And I'm Mike Ray. Thank you guys for joining me. All right. I will see you guys next time. Next event, Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. This is going to be a weekly thing. Next week, we'll go more into depth about some of the things that we left off on this time. More about connecting with the universal consciousness and healing. More ways to just take those little steps that we could do each day. take a second to hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, follow me on Facebook. You guys can check out links in the description. You can drop a comment or anything. If you have questions or comments to make for next time, I'll address it. And as always, you guys could reach out to me, my social media, Facebook. You guys can find me, Michael Albert Ray. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great night. I'm Mike Ray. That's all
You
for
too.
today.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Mike.
so much.